Welcome back to Fresh Health. Today we are at Anejo, one of my favorite restaurants. I'm here with Chef Nat Davidson, who is going to be chatting with us a bit about some of the most popular items on the menu, as well as sharing a little bit about why this restaurant is so great and you know, some of those fresh ingredients that's all about Mexican cuisine. So Nat, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me. It's been a while since I talked to you.
Yes, it's great to catch up and smell everything. It smells amazing. I wish we could put it through the camera somehow.
Technology will soon get there,
You just have to come into the restaurant and try the food. So Anejo, it's really fresh, basic, easy Mexican food. Tell me a bit about, you know, kind of where it all started and, you know, kind of your education and what inspired you to get into, you know, being the chef here at Anejo.
The concept of Anejo comes from one of our owners who actually has a house down in Sayulita, Mexico, and he loves spending time there and just the vibe, not just the food, but so much the atmosphere of being in Mexico in a relaxed atmosphere, eating fresh ingredients. And so he wanted to bring some of that back. So he paired up with a couple of restaurant partners in Calgary, and then this place was born. I was contracted on early on, and then I didn't really know much about Mexican food at the time. It wasn't really an area that I thought of as a huge culinary influence in my life. But then since then, I've gone down to Mexico a few times. I've had the chance to work in a couple restaurants and go to a couple different schools, and it's really kind of opened my eyes to the glories of ethnic cuisine in the Mexican culture, because it's an entire base of food surrounded by the ideas of fresh ingredients, using local, which is something that just North America is slowly kind of getting on board with. But in Mexico, you can grow everything in your backyard, so everything has always been a local procedure. Whereas now, we have brought this back to Calgary, so we try and use as many of the authentic Mexican ingredients as we can. We don't go so much for the local, we go for the from Mexico kind of feel. And that's for everything from our dried chilies and stuff like that, down to most of our avocados come from Mexico as well. So we have a couple different dishes we're going to talk about today, and shall we start on that?
Yes, let's start on this. Guacamole first.
So the guacamole is the single most popular thing that we sell at the restaurant.
Yes.
We go through right now 2,000 avocados a week.
Wow.
Once we get into June and July, when it's nice outside and it's more of a sitting on the patio with a margarita kind of style, we get up to almost 3,000 avocados a week. So we are the single largest user of avocados in Calgary, and I believe Canada, but I haven't checked on that in a while, so I won't make any bold claims.
So people are getting their healthy fats here.
Most definitely. Sometimes too much. There's definitely a couple tables that overindulge. So of course, the fresh ingredient principle is the most evident in guacamole. Guacamole is one of those things that everyone's had before, and then you can go to different places around Calgary and everyone has a variation on it. And I thought long and hard when we were opening this place what kind of guacamole we wanted to bring back from Mexico, and what we decided was just the simplest and truest form. So ultimately, guacamole means guac sauce. Mole is always sauce in the ancient language, so guacamole should technically just be pureed avocados. But the usual guacamole you get in Mexico is a guacamole mixed with pico de gallo, which is just a nice fresh salsa made out of tomatoes, onions, and a little bit of citrus juice. So our guacamole is just made up of avocados, some lime, chopped jalapenos, diced tomatoes, chopped onions, fresh cilantro, a little bit of garlic, and then just a mixture of a couple different salts. And it's just kept super, super simple. There's no added, anything really. It's just the purest form.
Yep. Perfect.
So,
it smells amazing.
We have, whenever anybody comes by, we try and make it the most authentic we can. So every guacamole is made fresh at the table.
Yeah.
So it is, I guarantee, the freshest guacamole you can get, because it's made literally in front of your eyes.
And I think that's one of the really cool experiences of coming here, is you get to watch things just be taken from the ingredient to made right in front of you, and that's what keeps it fresh. And the fact that you can see each singular ingredient lets you know that you're just using that.
Exactly, like we're not lying. It's definitely just exactly what you think it is.
Exactly.
And it is as fresh as it is possible to be.
Well, and I mean, even looking at your menu, there's a high percentage of it being gluten-free, and there's even a really good percentage of dairy-free as well. So obviously in authentic Mexican cuisine, there is not really a lot of wheat used.
Exactly, it was one of those things, and we've talked about it before, whereas I didn't really open Anejo with the expectation of kind of appealing to the gluten-free crowd, but it just kind of, it's a facsimile of doing a traditional style of Mexican cooking where they don't use a whole lot of flours, and any flour that they do use is almost always corn. Like flour tortillas and things like that is almost entirely an American innovation, whereas in Mexico everything is based off of corn because that's what grows. And then since everything is made out of fresh everything, then it's just kind of how it happens. So now we do make an effort to kind of stay true to that form where everything is gluten-free, and we try to appeal to vegetarians, gluten-frees. We even have a lot of steps taken in the kitchen to appeal to people that are a little bit more intense, like celiacs.
Great.
So it's a safe place to eat for people that have some restrictions.
That's so good to hear, because there's a lot of people that are always looking for those restaurants and they know they can come and have a great experience and not have to worry about the food.
Yeah.
So as far as in the kitchen, what kind of steps do you take to make sure that there's that
Our servers, one of the hardest things to do is remind the servers that everybody has to ask. So if somebody says gluten-free, is it just as a dietary choice? Because then you're not nearly as restricted. But if someone sits down and says they are celiac, then there's an allergy kit that's stored online in a sealed box, and then it's taken out. One person gets to go wash their hands, go off of line, sanitize themselves, come back, use the sanitized allergy kit, set up an entirely separate station, and then everything is done completely separate from the line. And then we take no risks. So there's some things that are deep fried here that aren't actually gluten. They don't have gluten in them, but because gluten touches the fryers, we won't let anybody that says they're celiac go into that. So it's knowledgeable staff that know how to handle these situations.
Great, that's good. So make sure when you're eating at a restaurant, you tell people what your severity of your allergy is, because then they can accommodate that. So thank you for sharing that process.
No problem.
Salsa next. That looks amazing, by the way.
So much practice. Before we get into the salsa, I'll talk briefly about molcajetes. In the guacamole, it's not as big a deal because there's not as much citrus in this one, but in this one, it really does affect the flavor of it.
Oh, really?
So molcajetes are a traditional thing in a Mexican family that's handed down from ages to ages. So no one really knows where they come from, because almost every family has one that's borderline more than 100 years old sometimes. I saw one when I was down in Mexico that a little abuela had that was about that big around, and she said that her great-great-great-grandma gave it to her daughter, and it's just been passed down ever since then. Now what happens is you can never really wash these with soap or water. We sanitize ours with heat so that we meet all the regulations we need to, but we don't actually lose the authenticity of it. They're made out of a basalt rock, which is porous, and then as you use it every time, there is actually a little bit of flecks of basalt that'll be worn off into the food, and it changes the flavor. The flavors will also sink into the rock itself, and then the more often you use it, the more it becomes imbibed with the power of everything you've made before it.
Wow, that's really cool.
Ours, because they're not generations and generations, are actually not nearly as separate from the ones in Mexico as you might think, because of how often ours are used. A normal Mexican family might use theirs 3 times a week, whereas ours are used 25 times a day. So I like to think that ours are actually pretty on par with the ones that have been going through generations, but they're not nearly as old. So
that is really interesting.
This dish here is our salsa de molcajete. So again, it's just something that focuses really much on very simple flavors, something that's super easy to do at home. You can even buy the molcajetes at Williams and Sonoma for only $200, or you can buy them here. We have roasted tomatoes, some chopped fresh onions, cilantro, roasted garlic, and then a roasted jalapeno. And then I have a lime wedge, which we grill off the lime wedge just so that it changes the flavor of the citrus juice a little bit and adds a little bit more of a caramel underline without having to add anything else above and beyond what's naturally there already. So we just add this in there.
So when someone just wants to make a simple salsa at home, this is pretty much all they need.
Exactly. Just onions, cilantro if you like it. It's easily to exempt. Cilantro is one of those things that it's definitely, you either like it or you hate it. There's not really a middle ground with cilantro. But then roasted tomatoes, we just toss ours in just a little bit of olive oil, and then it just goes into the oven for a little bit. And then chopped onions, roasted garlic. You can use fresh garlic. I like the roasted garlic flavor. I find it works a little bit better for the dish. We'll break out the pestle in a moment. If you do happen to have a molcajete at home, it's much easier just to use a knife and fork just to chop things up a little bit. The tomato skins don't generally get worn down very much, so it's good to chop it up a little bit.
Yum. It smells so good.
And then
You just kind of grind it up. Okay.
now, depending on how much time you want to take doing this, it usually takes about 5 minutes to do one of these.
Okay.
So I might finish it about halfway and then we can move on. But the idea is to work all of the onions into a paste so you don't actually see whole onions anymore.
Oh, okay. So that's the key to
And then
salsa.
the flavors coagulate a little bit. If you don't happen to have a molcajete at home, you can easily do this in the blender. If we have like a large function or something like that, I'm not mean enough to make my poor staff have to do this for an entire day, so we just do a big batch in the blender. But if you wanted that real authentic flavor and texture, because no matter how long you do this, there's no way you'll get all the chunks out. So it is a matter of, this is what you would eat if you were to go to a small village in Mexico and they were to make you a salsa.
Awesome.
Is it would be a little bit rough like this.
Okay. And if someone wants to make it a lot more spicy, what should they add in?
I usually suggest habaneros. Habaneros are my favorite go-to Mexican chili if all you're looking for is just raw spice. I also really love the almost butterscotch-esque flavor of habaneros. Or you can just add an jalapeno. If you don't want it to be so spicy, before you roast the jalapeno, you can take the seeds out, and that'll change it dramatically. If you leave the seeds in, the jalapeno does get pretty spicy. The trick with using fresh chilies is you might come once and order this, and it'll be the exact same the next time, but because the chilies are from different batches or from different countries, then suddenly the chili will be 8 times as hot as it was the time before. It's the facsimile of using fresh chilies.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for kind of showing us some of the most popular items on the menu, and now you know how you can make some really easy, delicious guacamole and some really easy, delicious salsa. We are gonna come back and make another recipe. We'll see you back shortly. Welcome back to Fresh Health. Today we are here at Anejo and I'm with Chef Nat Davidson, and we've been making some delicious food, and we're going to continue on with an awesome salad that's on the menu, a Nicoise salad, and it looks so colorful. So tell me a little bit about the inspiration for this.
The inspiration comes from, well, let's backtrack a little bit. When we opened up Anejo, we wanted to go traditional Mexican, but a lot of the dishes that I put on the menu weren't very well received by Calgary, because Anejo was kind of the first of its kind as far as more real versions of actual Mexican food, and not so much the resort food that everybody is so used to. And so over the years, I've tried and make it more of a fusion of Mexican ingredients that are presented in such a way that Calgarians will enjoy them and actually come and want to try them. And so what we have here today is my take on a Nicoise salad. A Nicoise salad is one of the oldest and most stylized French salads. It always has potatoes, green beans, some type of lettuce, Nicoise olives, hard-boiled egg, and usually some type of fish on top of it. So what I've done is I've tried to take ingredients and flavors from Mexico and kind of combine this into something that fits this restaurant and something that is nice and fresh and healthy and colorful for our spring-summer menu.
Great. It smells amazing and looks amazing. So what do we put on the plate first?
Well, I'll assemble the salad as we go here, hopefully in such a way that it looks beautiful. So the first step is just a little bit of watercress. This is fresh watercress. We get it in still in the soil, and then for every time somebody orders it, it's just cut right then and there and then put onto the plate.
Very fresh.
So you try and get as much of that nice, crisp, peppery flavor as you possibly can. The Nicoise salad is a little bit of a heavier salad, so not as much lettuce as you might think, because the potatoes and everything else make up for it. It is kind of a full meal deal. The next step is potatoes. So for this, just to add a little bit of that splash of color, I'm using baby purple potatoes. And so these ones we just blanch off in heavily salted water, just because the salad itself isn't, it's not hugely flavorful. There's a little bit of dressing on there, but it's meant to be nice, crisp, and healthy, so not too much dressing. So all of the stuff that gets blanched off, you have to blanch it in heavily salted water so the flavors actually come through. The next step is some heirloom tomatoes. So the tomatoes are one of the main components of this dish as far as I'm concerned. I really like the tomatoes, especially if you get some nice, fresh, juicy ones in. Then it just adds such a nice splash of color onto the plate. It just makes a huge difference. And then just some nice trimmed green beans, just for a little bit of extra fiber in there. And again, just some more color and just to add another layer to the dish. The Nicoise olives. I'm personally a huge fan of olives, and Nicoise are some of my favorites. They always come without the pits, and they have that kind of nice underlying woody flavor to them. So we're just going to dump those kind of on top. The hard-boiled egg is the next step, so a little bit of protein just to add to the dish itself.
Yes.
Let's throw that on the side there, and then if you wanted, you could stop there. We have our dressing off there. Usually I'll squeeze it over top. That would look really ungraceful right now. But we like to add a little bit of a flair to it. So we have our gluten-free crusted tuna right here.
Awesome.
So we're using true ahi tuna. So it's A grade, the best that you can possibly get when you're in a landlocked province. And then we bread it in just a mixture of corn flour, pumpkin seeds, sesame seeds.
Pumpkin seeds. Interesting.
They're called pepitas in Mexico, and they're very widely used ingredients as far as using them in sauces or grinding them up and making little flours out of them and stuff like that. Before gluten-free ever really became a thing, Mexico extensively used a lot of ground nut flours without really consciously doing it for any real reason. So it's a huge thing that you can incorporate into dishes that people like here, because it appeals to that gluten-free crowd, and celiacs can enjoy it and things like that. So we just do a very light breading on it, and then just a quick deep fries, just so it sears it all on the outside. And ideally you want to cook just the breading and not the tuna itself. So then we just take that and just layer it down over top. And then you have a nice, fresh spring salad.
Yes.
And then the dressing that we put on this is a super vinegary dressing made out of Dijon mustard and then a mix of 6 different dried chilies.
Oh, wow.
So it has a little bit of a kick, but it's nothing more than really anything else on the menu at a Mexican restaurant, or what you shouldn't expect. And then the Nicoise dressing just kind of adds a nice finishing touch to the dish, because you have a lot of nice, round, watery flavors that are very spring-like, and then just a little bit of acid to kind of tie everything together.
This looks amazing. So many colors. Got your protein, your vegetables. You don't really need much else.
Nope.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for showing us this awesome menu item today. It looks amazing. And thanks so much for watching today. You'll have to come down to Anejo and try some guacamole and some tacos and some of this delicious salad. And we're excited to show you all of this today, and thanks for watching.